This lecture is titled The Holy Grail of Writing, a Model for Effective Literary Thesis Statements for the Poetry and Prose Passage Essays. You have already learned how to write one type of AP essay, the open-ended essay. Now we will be focusing on the other two essays you will write for the exam, the essays about a poetry and prose passage. In this lecture, I will be teaching you a specific thesis sentence structure. You will be required to use this thesis sentence structure throughout the rest of this AP English Literature and Composition course when you are writing poetry or prose passage essays. I call this thesis sentence structure the holy grail of structures because it has been passed down to me from consultants on the College Board. These consultants have studied student responses in the AP Literature exam for decades and come to an understanding about what types of thesis statements score well on the test. Although there may be other effective ways to write a thesis statement, this method will force you to effectively analyze a text, and it has a proven track record for scoring well on the exam. The thesis statement structure you will need to follow is in this format. In blank, the author uses blank, blank, and blank to blank, illustrating that blank. An example of a thesis statement that uses this structure would be, in Jennifer Price's essay, The Plastic Pink Flamingo, A Natural History, the writer uses strong and precise diction, verbal irony, and iconic symbolism to contrast the rare and special pink flamingo bird in nature with the gaudy artificial representation of the bird in post-World War II America, illustrating that modern American culture has superficial and materialistic priorities. Let's begin by breaking down this Holy Grail thesis structure. Once again, here is the thesis statement format. In the first blank, the blue blank, you will put the topic that you are writing about. You will answer the question, who is the writer, and what is the title of the piece? In the next set of blanks, the red blanks, you will establish a direction for your essay. When I say direction, I mean that you will list the specific literary techniques that you will be discussing. You are explaining how the writer is doing what he or she is doing. In the green blank, you will write your claim. Your claim will be a specific verb, such as contrasts, shifts, juxtaposes, etc. While the red blanks list the techniques the author is using, the green blank explains what those techniques are accomplishing or what the writer is doing. Finally, the last blank is the universal idea. This is where you will write the theme of the piece. The writer uses techniques to accomplish a purpose. But why? What is the author trying to teach us? Now that we know what each color means, let's look at the example again. In Jennifer Price's essay, The Plastic Pink Flamingo, A Natural History, the author uses strong and precise diction, verbal irony, and iconic symbolism to contrast the rare and special pink flamingo bird in nature with the gaudy artificial representation of the bird in post-World War II America, illustrating that modern American culture has superficial and materialistic priorities. Let's practice writing a thesis statement of our own. We will base our thesis statement off of this short prose piece, which is entitled Birthday Party by Catherine Brush. They were a couple in their late 30s, and they looked unmistakably married. They sat on the banquette opposite us in a little narrow restaurant having dinner. The man had a round, self-satisfied face with glasses on it. The woman was fadingly pretty in a big hat. There was nothing conspicuous about them, nothing particularly noticeable, until the end of their meal when it suddenly became obvious that this was an occasion. In fact, the husband's birthday, and the wife had planned a little surprise for him. It arrived in the form of a small but glossy birthday cake with one pink candle burning in the center. The head waiter brought it in and placed it before the husband, and meanwhile the violin and piano orchestra played Happy Birthday to You, and the wife beamed with shy pride over her little surprise, and such few people as there were in the restaurant tried to help out with a pattering of applause. It became clear at once that help was needed because the husband was not pleased. Instead, he was hotly embarrassed and indignant at his wife for embarrassing him. You looked at him and you saw this, and you thought, "Oh, now, don't be like that." But he was like that. And as soon as the little cake had been deposited on the table and the orchestra had finished the birthday cake piece, and the general attention had shifted from the man and the woman, I saw him say something to her under his breath, some punishing thing, quick and curt and unkind. I couldn't bear to look at the woman then, so I stared at my plate and waited for quite a long time. Not long enough, though. She was still crying when I finally glanced over there again. Crying quietly and heartbrokenly and hopelessly all to herself under the gay big brim of her best hat. Let's start by talking about paragraph number 1. What do you notice that's interesting or unusual? Now, when you answer a question like this, remember to respond by pointing to the text itself. Let me show you what I mean. For instance, when I consider what is interesting or unusual, I notice the repeating nothing word. I also notice that the wife is fadingly pretty, but she's in her late 30s, not an old woman by any means. I notice the author's reference to her big hat. A big hat could be worn to draw attention to oneself, or opposingly, it could be used as a way to hide oneself. I notice that the word occasion is capitalized. I wonder why that is. I think that's interesting that the author says that the couple is unmistakably married, and I wonder what that means. I notice that the man has a round face, but they're in a narrow restaurant. I bet a narrow restaurant would feel cramped. I wonder if that would make the couple feel uncomfortable. At this point in the story, I'm still wondering what the little surprise is for him. Is it the husband's birthday? I find some other phrases interesting too. The fact that the husband has a self-satisfied face, that he has glasses, that they're having dinner. A lot of direct characterization is going on in this paragraph, and all of these details are details that the author deemed important enough to share with us. Let's look at the next paragraph, paragraph number 2. The author chooses to say, "it arrived," right off the bat, instead of saying the word cake. It is a pronoun and impersonal. There is a pink candle, which is an interesting color choice for the husband's birthday. There is a violin and piano orchestra, so this is a fancy restaurant. The wife is no longer fadingly pretty in this paragraph. Now she is beaming. We find out, however, that the husband is not pleased. He's hotly embarrassed and indignant. That makes me wonder why the wife would do this for him if he wouldn't like it. Did she misjudge how he'd react? There is much more indirect characterization in this paragraph than the last. The author has transitioned from telling to showing. Let's move on to the last paragraph. The author starts to use the words you and I. The first paragraph had been written in an omniscient point of view, but now in the third paragraph, as readers, we have been drawn into the story, and the speaker becomes a character as well. We find out how the speaker feels about this situation. He says he can't bear to look at the woman. The author lists 3 words for the husband: quick and curt and unkind, and 3 words for the wife: quietly and heartbrokenly and hopelessly. He ends with a reference to her best hat. Presumably, the wife was excited to do this for her husband if she started off the night dressed up in her best hat. Now that we have pointed out some details in this short story, we have to ask ourselves the question, what is this about? What is the meaning? When we search for meaning, we are searching for something we cannot touch. What thing that we cannot touch, or idea, is the author presenting to us? Let's think about some abstract concepts that are touched upon. I think of insecurity, happiness, disappointment, and relationships. You might consider the title, which is usually a reference or a metaphor for something else. What is the story really about? Try to say it in a sentence. For instance, the author could be saying that what's pleasing to one person is not pleasing to another, or it's important to not take things for granted, or that differences of character lead to the end of relationships. Let's practice crafting a Holy Grail thesis for an essay about birthday party. The first blank is easy. We simply need to write the title and author. Birthday Party by Catherine Brush. In the red blanks, we will need to list which literary devices we will be discussing in our body paragraphs. Based on the discussion we just had, I think that we would want to discuss how the author uses diction, syntax, and point of view. Next is perhaps the most difficult part, our claim. What is the author doing? This should be a verb. I think that to get her point across, the most significant thing the author does is to get across her point is to shift her tone. Finally, what is the universal idea, or what is the theme? There are many things you could say here. Think about abstract concepts, things you cannot touch. What is she saying about these abstract concepts? If I were writing this essay, I think I would say that Brush is showing us that assumptions are often deceptive, as seen by the wife's misguided efforts to please her husband. Let's stand back and look at this thesis. Although we filled in all the blanks, it could definitely be improved. For instance, look at what we've written in the red blanks: diction, syntax, and point of view. AP readers would not like this list. Simply saying that the author uses diction is a weak thing to say. Diction is simply word choice, and all authors use words. We want a stronger thesis than one that simply claims that the author uses words to get her point across. So here in the red blanks, always make sure that you're not just listing techniques. Be specific and always have an adjective before each technique. For instance, we could say that Brush uses colloquial diction, maybe varied syntax, and shifting points of view. This is a much stronger thesis than one that simply lists diction, syntax, and point of view. Let's look at the green blank. We should be more specific here as well. The author shifts the tone, but let's say what the tone is. Which tone does she start with, and which does she end with? We could say that she shifts from a mundane, almost boring, run-of-the-mill tone to an uncomfortable tone. This is more specific and tells the reader exactly what you have in mind and plan to discuss in your essay. Finally, let's look at the universal idea. Assumptions are often deceptive is an acceptable thing to say here, but let's give our thesis a little oomph or something special. A neat thing to do here would be to echo a phrase from the text itself and use that in your thesis statement. Something that stands out to me in Birthday Party is that pink candle burning in the center. That lone candle has always seemed symbolic to me, and I'd like to use that phrase, burning in the center. Maybe we could revise our universal idea to say that assumptions of individuals burning in the center are often deceptive. Of course, in the timed environment of the AP exam, you may not have time to add special touches like this to your universal idea, but if you do, it makes your thesis even stronger. Let's stand back and read what we have. In Birthday Party by Catherine Brush, the author uses colloquial diction, varied syntax, and shifting points of view to shift from a mundane tone to an uncomfortable tone, illustrating that assumptions of individuals burning in the center are often deceptive. This is an excellent thesis, and it would signal to any AP reader that you are well on your way to crafting a strong essay.